Chapter 37. Salem Supreme. Aunt Gloria loomed over Marcus in her dressing gown like a force-tamed gale. "What do you know, Marcus? Where's Salem?" She grabbed Marcus's sleeve. "Say something! Speak!" Detective Inspector Pierce led her back to her chair. Mum bought Marcus a drink of lemonade and led him to another chair, but he refused to sit down or take the drink. He shook his head and his hood fell back. Then he wiped his face on his sleeve and looked up and stared at me. I remembered to lift up my lips, which Mr. Shepherd says to do when you meet somebody new, because it means you can be their friend. But Marcus's lips didn't move, which means he didn't want to be my friend. "Marcus is here to say sorry," Detective Inspector Pierce said. "He was too frightened to come forward earlier. He thought he'd get into trouble. Now he told us what he knows. I have the statement here he made earlier, and the story starts out just as Ted worked it out." She nodded to Cat. "With Cat's help, I understand." "My help?" said Cat. "I've never worked this out without you, Cat," I said. Detective Inspector Pierce continued. "Marcus's mum is outside in a squad car with another officer waiting. She wanted you to hear his story too. When he's done, we'll take them home." "But I just don't understand." Rashid squeezed his knuckles into his head. "Marcus and Salem spent several hours together the day Salem disappeared," Inspector Pierce explained. "Didn't you, Marcus?" Marcus nodded. "By arrangement. Then Marcus went back to Manchester on his own. Salem didn't go, but he was supposed to, wasn't he, Marcus?" Marcus nodded again. "You see, Salem had planned to run away." "No," Aunt Gloria moaned, putting her head in her hands. "But he didn't. Not in the end. He changed his mind." Aunt Gloria looked up. "He changed his mind," she said softly. She nodded. "That's right. He changed his mind. Do you want to explain, Marcus?" Detective Inspector Pierce asked. "Or would you rather I read out your statement?" There was a pause. Marcus put his hood back up so his face was hidden again. A voice you could hardly hear said, "The statement, miss." So Detective Inspector Pierce read out Marcus's statement, and this is what it said. Police transcript of statement made by witness Marcus Flood. "My name is Marcus Flood, and this is the truth. Salem is my best mate. Because before he joined my school last September, they called me horrible names, and now they don't. Salem joined my class and sat next to me. They called him names too, but he didn't take any notice, even when Jason Smart grabbed his sandwiches and threw them on the floor, saying they smelled worse than a yak's bum. The next day, Jason Smart opened his own sandwich box, and there were thousands of maggots heaving in it. The whole class was in fits. Salem went from caller to Moshy Salem Supreme, and since I was his friend, we were moshers together. We had our shirts half tucked in, half out, and the top moshers of 9K. When you're a mosher, you're not supposed to be keen. You sit at the back of the class and look dead bored. But with drama it was different. We were the mosher keeners because Mr. Davidson was so cool. He chose us to star in the school play at Easter, The Tempest. Mr. Davidson played Prospero, Salem was Ferdinand, and I was Miranda. Ha, the girl. My voice hadn't broken then. I had a long dark wig to wear and a white dress, and every time I said I was certainly a maid, the whole class cheered and stamped their feet, and I rolled my eyes and everybody went, "Ooh la la!" Mr. Davidson said I was a comic genius. Then, after Easter, Salem came back to school with bad news. His mum was moving to New York, taking him with her. I was gutted. I sat in science and technology thinking how I'd pinch some chemicals and swallow them. Oh, because I couldn't stand the thought of going back to being called names. Without Salem, that's what I'd be. Salem didn't want to go either. He asked if he could go and live with him, but his dad said no. Then his mum booked the tickets. They were to fly out from London so she and Salem could visit their relations they hadn't seen in years called the Sparks. Salem said the Sparks could burn in hell. I said at least we'd get to fly the London Eye, which was something we'd always dreamed of doing together. But Salem said flying it without me wouldn't be any fun. That's when we had the big idea. We'd meet up, me and my Miranda disguise, and the ride of the London Eye together. Then he'd take the disguise and vanish, and together we'd run off, leaving his mum and the Sparks behind. We'd get a train back to Manchester together later that day, and he'd hide out somewhere, and I'd bring him food. And when his mum's flight had taken off to New York without him, he'd go and live with his dad, and his dad would have no choice but to say yes. Then he and I could go on being the top moshers of 9K. The first thing I did was ring Christy, my big brother. Christy's down in London. He's always calling to ask for money, and Dad tells him he's not a bottomless pit and to get lost. This time I rang him. I said if he met me by the London Eye and helped me and my mate Salem carry out the joke we were planning, I would give him a tenner, and he said yes. Salem went down to London with his mum on Sunday. The next day, I told my mum I was off out for the day with Scouts, and she believed me and even gave me some money. Plus, Salem had given me his savings, so I had more than enough money to buy 2 tickets for the London Eye. Then I hopped on an early train to London and didn't pay a penny because that's the trick. I know to dodge the ticket collectors. I got off at Euston Station and found my way to the river, and there was the Eye. You just couldn't miss it. Christy showed up first. I put on the wig I'd worn as Miranda and these slick sunglasses I bought in the Costa del Sol last summer, plus a jacket I pinched from Shannon, my older sister. Christy roared his head off and said I was a crazy transvestite and Dad would skin me alive if he could see me. We bought 2 tickets. I didn't tell him that Salem was going to run away and I was going to hide him. I said we were playing a joke on Salem's cousin, the Sparks. My voice had broken since being in the play. No way could I go up to the Sparks cousins myself. That you'd have spotted that I wasn't a girl the moment I opened my mouth. That's why we needed Christy. Plus, he was an adult and nobody would ask any questions when we bought the tickets. We'd got the tickets. I'd even called Salem to see where he was. Hurry up, I said. We're boarding at 11:30. He said he was just coming over the river, and minutes later he arrived. The mums went off for coffee, just as we'd planned, and Salem and the 2 Sparks cousins joined the ticket queue. Christy went over pretending to be a stranger, although he'd met Salem once before. He gave Salem the ticket and showed him to the place in the queue, and he dashed off to work because he was running late. I nearly died laughing, pretending not to know Salem. I had to bite my cheek all the way to the ramp, and still Salem didn't look at me. Not until we were up on the wheel itself. Then the capsule doors closed and we went up and we split our sides. It was magic. Air and light and miles of London to ourselves. We were so happy. Then when we got to the top, Salem went quiet. He was looking straight at the sun. Salem, I said. What are you staring at? Manhattan, he said. It's London, not Manhattan. It's my fate, Marcus. I've got to face it. I was sad then. It sounded like he'd changed his mind about swapping identities, disappearing and coming back with me to Manchester to hide. But when everyone turned to get the photo taken, he laughed and took the wig off my head, stuck it on his. I took off the jacket, he'd put it on, and I straightened the wig, popped on the sunglasses. It just took seconds. Nobody saw us. They were all looking the other way for their souvenir shot. Then the pod landed, and we walked right out. Under the noses of the Spark cousins, you should have seen their freaked-out faces. Salem put on this fancy walk just like a girl. Next, he cruised past where his mum was sitting having coffee, and she looked straight at him and didn't recognise him. I dragged him off before she noticed me, and we disappeared into the crowd. He got his mobile phone out and turned it off. The day's ours, Marcus, he shouted. He thumped me on the back and took off the wig. He'd left the camera behind with one of his cousins, but between us we still had some money, so we bought a disposable camera at a chemist's and slapped one of me on the bridge. And then he bought hot dogs and Mars bars and cokes, and we picnicked in the park by the river, and I pretended to be a duck squawking. Salem said I was a comic genius. Then we went to this square where all the buskers perform. They were dead funny. A juggler on stilts with a tear in his pants, a magician with a silver globe that rolled over his body, a clown that did 10 somersaults and landed on his nose. After the show, Salem gave the clown his last pound. We walked up Tottenham Court Road and found the shop that sells electric pianos. You could do organ, strings, trumpets and drum beats all at once. It was great, the best day I'd ever had. I wanted it to last forever, but it didn't. We got to Euston Station. That's when Salem told me he wasn't coming with me. I can't, Marcus, he said. You can. It's easy. You hop on, you hide in the bog. It's not that. I can't run away. Not from my mum. She's some mum, my mum. She's the only mum I've got, and it's not just her, it's the cousins, Ted and Kat. The Sparks? Thought you said you couldn't care less about them. That was before I met them again. They're great, Kat and Ted. If I don't go back, they'll get in trouble for letting me go. On the Eye by myself, and Mum will be frantic. I didn't know what to say. People rushed by, dashing for trains, announcements droned on. I heard one for Manchester. My train. You're just a mosher wannabe, I said. Yeah, you're the real mosher, Marcus. I'm not in your league. He smiled. You did the maggots, didn't you? How do you know? When I was round your house last, your dad told me about his hobby, fishing. Then he gave me back Shannon's pink fluffy jacket, and I put it in my backpack along with the wig. But I made him keep the sunglasses. They looked good on him. A whistle blew. It was my train. We said goodbye, and he hugged me. Run, Marcus! I'll send you a card from the Empire State Building. So I ran. Doors were slamming, and I heard him shout after me. Remember, you're a mosher, Marcus. You're a comic genius. A guard saw me and shouted. I jumped on the train. I only just made it before the doors locked. I saw Salem waving as the train pulled out. It was the last time I saw him. I hid in the toilet until after Stoke-on-Trent. At Manchester, I got off without getting caught and went home. How was Scouts? Mum asked. Fantastic, I said. Later that night, when I was sneaking Shannon's pink jacket back into her wardrobe, I found Salem's mobile phone in the pocket. He'd left it behind, just like he'd left his camera with the cousins. I'd mail it to him when we got to New York, I thought, and put it in my desk drawer. The next day, the police came. They said Salem had gone missing. Mum was there. If I'd admitted to have been with Salem the day before, she'd have been livid, so I stuck to my Scout story. But after the police left, I started worrying. Where was Salem? Why hadn't he gone back to the Sparks house like he'd said? I tossed and turned all night. Then today I couldn't take it any more. I took out his phone, meaning to call his mum and tell her what I knew. So I did. I turned it on. There were about 20 voicemail messages waiting, all from her. She sounded terrible. I put through a call, but it rang and rang. Then she answered, and I realised I couldn't face talking to her. I hung up and switched the phone off again. I hid it under my mattress. Then, later, Christy rang me on my mobile. He said Salem's cousin had bumped into him at the motorbike show where he was working. He hadn't given me away, but if he knew where Salem was, I'd better go straight to the police and leave him out of it. He shouted his head off. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I'd get in trouble. Then tonight the police showed up, and they knew everything. Salem's cousin Ted had worked it out. They said how it had been with the wig and the eye and the jumping on the train. It was like Ted Spark had been in my head, seeing my thoughts. And I remember Salem saying how he had some weird syndrome that made him think like a giant computer. So this is the truth, and nothing but the truth. I last saw Salem at Euston Station. This is all I know. Marcus Flood.